Welcome to the Holy Rebellion. Welcome back to the Holy Rebellion. Today we're going on a journey with Cathy. Welcome, Cathy. We're grateful to have you with us.
Thank you so much for the honor of being a guest on your podcast.
Yeah, you bet. We're going to dive into your journey. Will you just give us a sample of who you are and what you're doing?
Yeah, so my name's Cathy Garrett. I live in Orlando, Florida. I've been married to my amazing husband for about almost 8.5 years. We have two little girls who are 7 and 5.
Let's start at the beginning. What ultimately led you to, I like to call it your journey to Jesus. What led you to Jesus?
So I grew up Catholic, so got all the sacraments through middle school and always believed in God. And then in my 20s, like many, kind of got in with the wrong crowd, just a different crowd who wasn't following Jesus and really just was not walking with the Lord. And I was the girl who would go to church, or excuse me, go to the bar on Saturday night and then go to church Sunday morning, the checklist item, so to speak. And then it was
Yeah.
actually a friend that I met at a bar in downtown Orlando that led me to Christ. She and my twin sister were the two most paramount people who led me to Christ. And then thankfully, I started following Jesus because my husband was that really a ministry kid. He didn't live overseas or anything like that, but grew up in the church, accepted Christ in middle school. And so that's one of the main reasons our relationship worked, that and live music. We both, my husband's a sound engineer, so we both
Okay.
enjoy live music. We love going to concerts. So then fast forward to 2019, during the birth of my second daughter, we suffered what's called an amniotic fluid embolism. And that nearly tried to kill me and really tried to kill both of us because I was still in labor. Thankfully, my daughter is perfectly fine. She did endure a laceration and needed to be resuscitated, but after she was resuscitated, like her recovery was just a miracle, really. Within 48 hours, she was pretty much off. If I'm trying to remember, I think she was off all tubes
Oh,
and just really thriving in the NICU. Unfortunately for me, my recovery's been a lot longer. I was in a coma for 9 days,
oh
had,
my
I
gosh.
think it was, yeah, pretty intense. I am trying to remember. I think I had 7 surgeries during that time, a month stay in the hospital, 3 weeks in the hospital, 8 days in rehab. I count it together as all together in the hospital because I was not at
Yeah,
home. But to me, it's
right.
the like just being in the hospital. And then that would actually, not ironically, because I don't really believe in irony after this experience, but today is the 5 year anniversary of me coming home from the hospital.
To the
So,
date. Congratulations.
yes, thank you.
What a
It's
big day.
pretty, yeah, it is a big day. And I always like to at least honor the day and thank the Lord for everything that He's done thus far. But yeah, October 18th in 2019 was the day that I would start my recovery, and
Yeah.
did a year of in-home rehab and have been doing 4 years of outpatient rehab. I actually had a rehab appointment just this morning. So it's
Okay.
been a long road, but God is good. And I wasn't supposed to survive. So
And you did. Yeah.
anything at this point is gravy. So we're
It's
really
all
grateful.
extra. You mentioned you just had rehab recently. How's recovery? Are things are looking good?
Comparative to where I was the day I woke up, absolutely. Things are looking good. Like I'm walking again. I do wear a brace on my leg because I had a stroke at the same time. So I have drop foot
Holy
on
cow.
one side. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I have a sibling I have two siblings who had severe perinatal trauma, but I never knew, like I didn't quite grasp the concept that it could really threaten your life.
Yeah.
Doctors told my husband that I had a 1% chance of survival, and I only know of 3 or 4 AFE survivors who survived and were left disabled. A lot of them go back to their lives, physically speaking, are pretty much okay. Obviously,
Hmm.
emotionally and mentally, there's a massive toll.
Yeah.
But within the AFE community, it's even pretty rare to become disabled because it's a disorder or a disease of spectrum, is what they say. But yeah, so things are looking up. 2 years ago, I started horseback riding again. It
All right.
doesn't look the same. Like I mentioned, I rode, really even competed nationally in college. It was pretty I would ride 3, 4 hours a day and not think twice of it. And now I'm riding 20 to 30 minutes and I'm pretty wiped afterwards. And actually, when I told my husband I wanted to ride horses again, he was like, "Are you crazy? No, you almost died. That's not happening." But thankfully, my college had a therapeutic riding program. So I was familiar with it. And it part of being on the equestrian team is you had to volunteer for Special Olympics. I used to volunteer for it. And then 2 years, no, it was about a year and a half ago, I showed in Special Olympics, which is the other side of the coin, so to speak. But yeah, I've surpassed all of my doctor's expectations. I like to say that I get my kind of spunk and my grit from my dad. My dad is a pretty scrappy guy
Yeah.
and a fighter in and of himself. And so I like to say I get that from my dad. And it just, it's miraculous, like what the Lord, we're so grateful for what God has done in our life.
Okay, I've got several questions up to that point. First of all, I've ridden horses. I'm from Wyoming. I've been around horses. What about it is therapeutic for you?
Oh, everything. Literally, like I even just start driving on so it's a long driveway to get to the barn. And I just turn on the driveway and like my blood pressure immediately drops. Like it's just my happy place. It used to be a golf course, so there's a beautiful lake and it's just so quiet. Like we live in a big city and normally it's like loud and busy, but they're not in a rush. They're just taking their
Okay,
time.
like peaceful.
It's Yeah, it's so peaceful. And I don't know, just even just being around the horses, like I don't always ride when I go out there, but even just like giving them a treat or giving them a pat, when you like brush them and things like that, it's called grooming. I really enjoy grooming. Just being around them, I just feel so different than my hectic, busy life, as you can
Yeah,
imagine, with 2 kids.
yeah. So it's the opposite, very tranquil with the horses.
Yeah,
Then you go
absolutely.
home and you're cleaning up cookies off the floor and peanut butter on the wall. Yeah.
Yes.
I've got 3 kids. I just gave them lunch and we're still recovering. It's sometimes
Yeah.
the floor never quite recovers.
Yeah, at least in the elementary years, I've just given up
Yeah.
hope that for now it's just going to be messy.
Yeah. One of the things, so I'm naturally just a very neat, tidy person. And so when my
Hmm.
wife and I were first married, like it's been almost 10 years ago, our home was just spotless and it was beautiful and it was very neat and tidy. And then I had kids. And one of the hardest things for me was giving that up. It's okay.
Hmm.
I can be happy or I can be clean. And I couldn't
Yeah,
really have
for
both. So I
sure.
had to give up. I had to lower my standards basically to the floor in order to keep my sanity.
I'm still working on that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's still a work in progress. Even though my kids are 7 and 5, I at least give them their room. They have to clean their room like once a week, but in
Yeah.
between, it's allowed to be as messy as they want. But then too, it's hard because sometimes I trip over toys, and I have where my stroke hit is your speech balance. It's speech balance and emotion center, so I have balance issues. So that's like
A little dangerous
we
for
can't
mom.
yeah, it can be
Yeah.
a little dangerous.
No
um
skateboards by the stairs.
Thankfully we do not have stairs, and
Oh,
that's
there you go.
very intentional.
Yeah.
At least on my part. My husband, I think, would be fine with stairs, but yeah, I had to lower my standards. It's a work in progress. I'm definitely not perfect, but yeah, it has changed a lot.
Going back to another thing you said, you were in a coma. Do you recall anything? Do you have any experience from the coma?
Yeah, so it's weird. I can literally remember exactly where I was when I remembered this memory, but I remember just being in a white tunnel, like the brightest white you could imagine. So I'm in a white tunnel, and I don't remember if there was like a gate or anything like that. I more just remember hearing a voice say, "It's not your time yet." And actually, when I was in the coma, I don't remember. That was literally my only memory from those 9 days. And but I do, or excuse me, my husband did tell me about an interaction where, so I had to be placed on a machine called ECMO. So
Hmm.
think similar. I was on dialysis too because my kidneys shut down. But so
Oh,
think
that's a nightmare.
yeah, it is. I don't remember it. So that's a good thing. I was off
Yeah.
it by the time
Pros
I
and
woke up.
cons.
So that's okay.
It was all right.
But so think dialysis is for kidneys, ECMO is
Yeah.
for your heart and lungs. And
Okay.
it's like with COVID impacting patients' lungs, it became more well known and more prevalent. in hospitals, but I unfortunately needed it for my heart and my lungs. And the first surgery that I came out, I was stable enough that I didn't need ECMO. And the surgeon told my husband, thank goodness we didn't have to put her on ECMO. So then, about 5 or 6 hours later, they determined I was still internally bleeding. So they take me back to surgery. And after that surgery, they couldn't get my blood pressure stabilized because over the course of those 24 hours, I coded 6 times.
Which means like you died.
Yes,
You
I was
died six
clinically
times.
dead. No pulse, no respiratory effort,
Six
clinically
times.
dead. Six
Most of us
times.
only get one. You got six.
I
You're doing
know,
all
six.
right.
Yeah, I'm on my seventh life. Hopefully, it doesn't go to 9 because I'm
Yeah.
like, ooh, only three
You got a
left.
few more.
Yeah, a few more in the bank. But
Yeah.
they put me on ECMO, and after that surgery, or the surgeon comes out to talk to my husband, and I believe my husband, my mother-in-law, and my sister-in-law were there, and they tell my husband like we had to put her on ECMO, and my husband, being an engineer, is always thinking one step ahead and says, "Last time you said ECMO was the next step. What's the next step after this?" And the surgeon said, "That's it. That's all we can do for her.
This is
It's
the
up
end
to
of the
her.
road.
This is the end of the road." And so then my mother-in-law pipes up and, or excuse me, yeah. So my mother-in-law pipes up and says, now she's in God's hand. And the surgeon was like, what a wonderful place to be. And
He's
so
not wrong.
yeah, for sure. I wonder if maybe during one of those codes during the second surgery, if that's when I experienced that interaction, I guess you could call it. I'm not really sure
Yeah.
what to call it. But then the next day or 2 days later, my husband said I had a look in my eye that I just really wanted to give up. I wanted to die. I was just exhausted and just really probably in quite a bit of pain. And so he coordinates with the child life team and my ICU nurses to bring my daughter in to meet me. And they actually debated doing skin to skin because I'm not, you have kids, so you probably know
Yeah.
how beneficial skin to
Yeah.
skin is for
Yeah.
both everyone involved.
Right.
But I had to have open heart surgery. So I have a
So
sternum
you had
scar.
wounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at that point, my chest was still completely open. So when you need multiple surgeries, they just leave it
They
open
just
and
leave it
pack you.
open.
Yeah.
Oh
Because they
my
need to
gosh.
see if you're actively
S-
bleeding or
Yeah.
throwing
It's
clots.
like the fridge. You just open it, see what's in there.
And close
Oh,
it back.
oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. So they debated doing skin to skin. And I had also caught a cold in the hospital.
Okay.
So
Don't want to get the baby
ultimately,
sick.
exactly. So
Yeah.
ultimately, they decided not to. But my husband said so they put the baby in the incubator and wheel her into my room. And my husband didn't take any pictures except for this day. Like for me, I'm a picture person. So I take pictures of literally everything. So I
Yeah.
wish I had more pictures, but I'm so thankful that he at least thought to take pictures of this day. Of technically, I don't remember it, but the first time meeting my daughter. And someone even took a little video of them pushing her into my room. And so he said after they pushed her into my room, I wasn't like conscious for it, but he said I worked really hard to just even open my eyes. And it wasn't even like a full open, like I'm looking at you. It was like a flicker. He said to me, Kathy, the baby's in the room. And so I just tried to acknowledge. I couldn't move, but I at least tried
Yeah.
to acknowledge that I
You were there.
understood. Yeah, I was there. And that was one of the big things they were concerned about was brain function. And they actually woke me up on day 9 because they needed to assess brain function. I still had to be intubated for 3 more days, which is, in my opinion, the worst experience outside of probably like being buried alive.
Tell me what that is.
That's when they put you have the tube down your throat.
That's the one you
And
always see in movies.
yeah, the
Yeah.
ventilator. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty. I remember they had to clean it every so often, and it literally feels like you're drowning.
So
Even
you're
though,
conscious with a tube in your throat and they're
mhm.
yanking it out to clean it and putting it back in.
No, so they don't take it out, but there's like a
Okay.
suction
Oh
that some
gosh.
sort of suction machine because I wasn't able to. So, partly because of the tube, but also the stroke, like swallowing issues are very common after a stroke as well. I couldn't properly take care of my secretions. And so they have to suction them out. And so
Hmm.
it's built into the tube, which is genius
It
because
is, yeah.
otherwise they'd probably have to do what you're describing, which would be so much worse. But yeah, it was not a fun experience feeling like I was drowning every time they did it
Oh
and
my
to not
goodness.
being able to communicate. I know a little bit of sign language, so I kept signing at the nurses and my husband.
All
But eventually,
appropriate gestures, I'm sure.
oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. But eventually they gave me a communication board so I could
Type or
point.
something?
It was, I don't know how to describe it. It was like a piece of plastic. So I couldn't type on it.
Okay.
Also, my fingers were incredibly swollen. So I
So you
didn't
got
have a whole
these
lot of,
like hot dog hands and you're trying to
yes.
point to
Yeah.
pictures.
So my husband said, so if I were to hold my hand like this, like there was no gap between
Oh
my
my
fingers,
goodness.
like literally sauce, not even hot dog. I would go for like a kielbasa, like sauce,
Yeah, full
like
kielbasa.
a full kielbasa.
Wow.
Um, but so it was a like a board, and I tried to type like on my phone or on the iPad, but the communication board, the letters were bigger, so it was easier for me to
Yeah.
like point to which
Okay.
letter I wanted. And then on one side, it had a whole bunch of pictures. Like I was allowed to have, I forget what it was called, but it was like a sponge on a stick, and they would dip it in water and just make my
Hmm.
mouth wet, or chapstick, or if I wanted, they had a foot rub on there. So just different
So
things
you're
that
just
someone,
smashing the foot rub button all the
yes,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, my favorite one was the mouth, because your mouth, it's just like the thirst
Gets
after
dry.
coming out of a coma is, and my lips were so chapped.
Yeah.
It was rough, but
Okay. Okay. Wow. Congratulations. You're still here. We're happy to have you with us.
thank
That is quite
you.
the
Me
experience.
too. Yeah.
I just want to review that it's out of body experience. I don't know what it was. So at one point you coded, you weren't here, you were somewhere, and you have some kind of experience. And will you just describe that one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just remember being in a tunnel, and it was like the brightest white that I have a light on right now. It was even brighter than that. Just like indescribably bright white tunnel. And I just remember I've struggled with anxiety pretty much my whole life. And so it's even outside of horseback riding and the barn, like it's the most peace I've ever felt in my entire life. Like I felt so safe, and I don't know. It's weird, hard to describe. But I don't quite remember if there was like a gate or anything like that. But I just remember hearing a voice say, "It's not your time yet."
What was the voice like?
I actually think it may have been my grandfather. It was definitely male, like 100% male.
It may be a voice
And
that you recognize.
yeah, I think I recognized it because when I initially described it to family members, I said, I think it was either grandpa or Jesus. And
Grandpa's got quite the voice then.
yeah, especially like being in the same company as Jesus.
Yeah.
But my grandpa was just a really incredible person. Ironically,
Yeah.
he was an engineer as well.
There's a
He helped
pattern
in,
here.
yeah, yeah, definitely. A lot of engineers in my family, but he helped invent the plastic that is in Tupperware, like the chemical
What a guy.
compound.
I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that man. Sure.
I am too. He just really was like the heart of our family and the
Yeah.
patriarch of our family. And he passed away in 2015. No, 2014. Next month will be 10 years since he's passed. And I had a special relationship with my grandpa. Like
Hmm.
we just really got each other, and I had a lot of respect for him and the way that he conducted himself. But yeah, I think the voice may have been him.
So he and Jesus are playing rock, paper, scissors on who gets to tell you to go back, and he
Yeah,
happened to win.
he did. And obviously, I would have listened to Jesus, but I'm not sure there's many other people I would have listened to, because after this experience, I have a craving for heaven unlike anything I've ever experienced. It's if God, actually during COVID, this, some may view this as egotistical, but my AFE was 6 months before COVID.
Hmm.
And during really the majority of 2020, I would just tell people, I was like, I'm not afraid of COVID. And I know it took a lot of people, and that may have been egotistical. But from my perspective, AFE has a pretty high mortality rate, and even ECMO has a 50% mortality rate.
Yeah.
So, like, the cards were stacked against me, and I still survived. But I just told people, I was like, if God took me today, I have perfect peace about that. I'm very content in my life. Obviously, I would not have wanted to leave my girls and my husband and my extended family, but I'm ready. At
Yeah.
any moment, I'm ready. Yep.
You're ready to go. That
Yeah.
reminds me of the story. I forget who it is. Maybe it's Elisha. It's when they get surrounded by that army and his like ward, that boy is worried. And he said, don't worry about it. There's more with us than are with them. That sounds like your
Yeah.
experience. The odds are stacked so far against you, but not really. It's not even close.
Yeah. And either way, it would have been okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why do you think the Lord saved you? Why did he grant you a little more time?
This is a question I ask myself probably.
Yeah.
It just, I think so. Actually, amniotic fluid tried to kill me twice. And I like to joke, I lived to tell the tale. But when I was born, like I mentioned, I have a twin sister. And when they pulled her out, I swallowed amniotic fluid and meconium. And so I had
Yeah.
meconium aspiration and
Yeah.
had to be intubated, transferred hospitals, and was given a 10% chance of survival. So to come
Not
through
just
like,
once,
yeah, twice is
twice.
God definitely has a plan for me here. I'm still actively trying to figure that out. I do have my podcast for perinatal trauma survivors. It's called Birth Trauma Stories, which has been amazing. I love meeting new people, and I feel like as I go on this journey, especially trying to share the gospel and meeting like fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, it's like adding more and more to or I should do it this way, more and more to my family. Like my family's just my extended family's getting bigger. I also created a program at our church. It's called Trinity. Our church is called Trinity Lake Nona, but the program is called Trinity Cares, and the CARES stands for Christ Always Restores Every Soul. And I
Nice
think that's
acronym.
what, thanks. I love a good acronym. They're
Yeah,
so
me too. I'm
fun.
with you.
Yeah, but the program is to care for our church body. We didn't have a program in place to care for the members of our church and the attenders of our church who maybe someone is elderly and can't cut their grass, or someone needs a grocery shopping run. We're giving the tangible needs that people may have. Or recently, there was a mom, her husband was serving overseas for, I think it was 2 weeks. And so she just asked us to bring her a few meals. So we brought meals. And in this, obviously, becoming disabled after having a baby is something I don't think anyone would expect. But for
Yeah.
me, it's been a long road. Like I mentioned, I'm still in rehab, and that's hard. I don't, I'm still human. I don't always want to go to rehab. And actually, I just started occupational therapy. I'd taken a break for about a year and just started going back again. I think it was in September. And I remember praying about it. There was one morning I was getting ready, just talking with God as I was getting ready and lamenting about where I was. And like, I thought by 5 years I'd be out of rehab. And God, clear as day, said to me, I have you right where I want you. And that was just like, okay, God, I am not God. I need to stop complaining. God has opened this door and giving me this opportunity to go back to OT and get stronger again. I need to take him up on it. That's our job, is to be obedient. And actually, I in 2021, I had a good friend who drove me to a lot, probably over 100 appointments. And she moved away, and I had texted her and said, "Hey, I got discharged from occupational therapy today. I'm really excited." And she congratulated me. And then maybe 30 minutes later, she goes, "We're going to have a huge party when you get discharged from all your rehabs." And I was like, "Yes, please. I love celebrating. I love a good party."
Yeah. You
Um,
look like you could party.
we definitely can. Then by 5 years, I'm not discharged yet. This really stinks. And I was like, let's do the party anyways. On the day that I count my survivorversary, September 28th, that's the day that I woke up from a coma,
Mhm.
and we threw a big party, and it was great. Yeah, just one of my friends called it my glory to God party, which I think is the epitome of what the intention was. I feel like I can't express it enough. We're so grateful. Like at this, actually, my younger sister calls these days my bonus days.
Yeah. It's all, yeah, I like the way you said it. It's all gravy. It's all just
Yep.
extra.
Yep.
So you mentioned at one point in your 20s that so you were raised Catholic and then you got some freedom, fell away a little bit, and then you said that you had a friend who led you to Christ. I'm curious, what do you mean by led you to Christ? What is that? Tell me the story of that.
So, like I mentioned, we met at a bar in downtown Orlando, and it was really just over time. It started definitely with the friendship first. And I believe at that point, she really wasn't quite in her faith and quite walking with the Lord, but we remained friends. I'd moved to South Florida, and she actually came to visit me down there. And so obviously that was good connection time. And I think at that point, so that was I met her in 2010, I believe. And then in 2011 is when she came to visit me. And she was, I think during that visit is when she was like, I call them nuggets, placing little nuggets here and there. And I remember I was trying to decide which internship I wanted to take next. And she was
Hmm.
like, whichever internship you take, God is going to protect you. Don't let the devil, I forget exactly what she said, but just basically don't let the devil doubt your decision. And I remember reading that text and being, yeah, that's not important, or I don't believe that. And then in 2013, I moved back to Orlando, and we picked our friendship literally right off where it was left. And through, I believe, the majority of 2013 and into 2014, she took me to church and really just lavished Christ's love on me and really met me where I was versus where I should have been. And one example is they always, so her sister and her sister's family went to church with us, and they would all go to lunch after church. And I used to work in the animal field, the zoo field, and you don't make a whole lot of money. So I couldn't afford to go to lunch every Sunday. And so she would pay for my lunch every single Sunday. And we're still friends to this day. Like
Yeah.
it's wonderful to see like how God put her in my life in a bar of all places.
Yeah.
Like God really can use anything. And I'm so thankful.
So it sounds like she wasn't necessarily like she was not a pedestal waving the Bible at you, but
No,
it was just in her
no,
manner of being that light shone through.
exactly. I just got chills. That's the perfect way to describe it.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I've got friends like that too. We're grateful for
Yeah.
those lights. The other thing you mentioned, so you said previously that you were checking the boxes. So you were checking the boxes, doing the things you thought were right. Then you fell away. Then you came back. And so I'm wondering, like, what is the difference in your life between when I was checking the boxes and what is it you're doing now that is not checking the boxes? Like, what's the difference?
I haven't been to a bar in many years. For one, not that there's anything wrong with bars. I'm not saying that there is. Like I mentioned, God can use any scenario, but it's, I'm a little stumped by your question, but I think I don't view my life now as checking the boxes. Like I view like Christ really is in me. Like I
Yeah.
wholeheartedly believe that it's not me creating the podcast, or it's not me creating this program at my church, or it's not me, doing this podcast. Like Christ is using me to do these things. And it's an honor. There are
Yeah.
challenges because I have limitations on my day-to-day life to like, again, I'm not perfect. I try to do Bible study at least once a day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Obviously, how old are your kids?
6, 4, and 1.
Yeah, so you're in the same age range. So we're super busy. So even if it's
Yeah.
only 5 minutes or reading, I do the U verse of the day. Even if it's only a couple minutes, I at least try to do something.
Yeah.
And two, praying throughout my day. I just had a realization. So we're about to leave for a wedding tomorrow, and I'm nervous. I haven't traveled a whole lot since I got sick, and we've not traveled with the kids at all since I got sick. This far, we're going to New Hampshire, and the flight is 3 or 3.5 hours, and navigating an airport. My 5-year-old has never flown before, and my 7-year-old hasn't flown, I think since she was 1. So it's been a
Yeah.
long time. And
Just
so
getting
I'm
him through the airport is,
a
I will
task.
pray for you.
Thank you. And I just feel the devil was really doubting our abilities to do
Yeah.
hard things. And actually 30 minutes before we recorded, I called a friend and was just like, "Can you pray for me?" 20 years ago, I never would have done that.
Yeah.
I would have called my sister complaining, "This is awful. I can't believe I'm disabled now. Like, why did God save my life?" Like spiraling, so to speak. And yeah, I just also, it's interesting you asked that question because last year on my survivorversary, I'm really good friends with my pastor's wife. My husband and I actually helped to launch our church.
You guys are the
We're
OG founders.
Yes, we are the OG, and it's
All
really
right.
the pastor and his wife and our family.
Okay.
We're the only
You're
OGs
carrying the
left.
team on your back. I
Yes,
like it.
and we won't leave unless God calls us out of state. But so last year on my survivor,versary, I went to coffee with her and she just affirmed in me. She's such a good affirmation person. Like she is really good at seeing people. But she just affirmed in me and she said, Cathy, she knew me. I'm trying to remember. It would have been about 3 years before I got sick. And she said, I just see such a difference in you and such a light in you now. Like just the way that you carry yourself now is so different. And I really do hope and pray, like it's not me, it's Christ's light shining through me. And one of my favorite, I don't know what to call it, maybe affirmation, I'm not really sure what to call it, but I really try hard to remind, which I should have done today when I was doubting myself, I can do hard things because of what Christ has done for me. And that came about because our church was having a meeting with the children's ministry. And they asked the question, what do you want your children to know when they leave your house and go to college, fly the nest? And I didn't have an answer at first, but about 30 minutes later, I was like, I want them to know that whatever is put in front of them, they can do hard things because of what Christ has done for me. And I just think back to those days when, it was a huge deal to open my eyes, or it was a
Hmm.
huge deal to breathe on my own. Like, I feel like I can't accurately describe how tumultuous and how just hard this journey has been, but God has been with us literally those days when I couldn't breathe on my own. He was with us. I had countless medical professionals praying for our family, and I've gotten to re-meet many of them, and it's given me the encouragement to continue on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's beautiful. I can do hard things because of
Yes.
what Christ did for me. And you
Yeah.
said that your friend said she saw the difference between you in the course of those years. And as you were talking, I just like kept thinking, what was the difference? And I think the difference is Jesus.
It is. It really is.
Was one of the frameworks I have a hard sometimes I have a difficult time with understanding religious language because it seems so abstract sometimes.
Mm,
And so I've just tried to ground it myself and make definitions that make sense in my head. And for example, the way I arrive at worship, what does worship mean? And it's something like this. And it's the way I think of it, it's Jacob's ladder, it's a pyramid, or it's an altar. And they're all kind of similar shape that ascend upwards. But altar might be my favorite one because it's something we can build ourselves. And we build it with stones. And we build that with stones in our lives of ascending priorities. And so we prioritize some things above other things. And so when you're a kid, for example, you hope that your kids put you guys right at the top of that pile because we want our kids to listen to us because we're going to teach them like the way to go. We're going to point them the right direction and also teach them, hey, don't be a punk. Listen to adults because then they'll want to help you, right? Just teach them good general things like that. But and as we grow, that altar builds and then it orients our lives towards something. And I think it orients our lives towards what we worship, towards our God. And that could be
mm,
anything. And so I think a lot of times we end up worshiping something that's not Jesus. And for example, early in probably almost all of our lives, maybe we worship our parents. And maybe that's not such a bad thing for a child in the very, very beginning because they're your North Star and they're
mm-hmm.
teaching you the way to go. Then kids pick up TikTok and they worship the next influencer. It's I will do anything this person says. Or I find a bodybuilder or like some yoga lady on YouTube and it's, hey, whatever she says, this is what I'm going to do because she looks the way I want to look and she lives the way I want to live. And so we orient our lives and our priorities that direction. And then on that altar, we make offerings and sacrifices, and we
Mm-hmm.
offer up our obedience and our will, and we sacrifice our whole souls and like to whatever we worship. And so, as you tell this story, I just see your life, that altar being built to orient you towards, uh, seems like Jesus to me, and your life just seems to radiate that. So it's just a great example. And so in my mind, like this is how that's the framework I'm building this in. So, anyways, just a thought.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. But I agree. I think we do build our life, and I'm doing a devotional now that goes through the different names of God, and I won't try to pronounce it, but the name means my everything. And so in the devotion, it talked about what is your everything, and my initial response was obviously God. But then as I read more, I was like, maybe I worship horses a little too much, especially achieving this massive. It took years for me to get back in the saddle after I got sick. And I was like, that's such a convicting moment to flip it on its head. Like I like these worldly, what's the word, like rewards or possessions really don't matter, because when we die we'll leave them behind, but what ultimately matters is where we're going to go, and that's where what needs to be at the top of our altar.
Yeah. And like horse is great. That near the top, sure. But and it sounds like you've got your priorities straight. But I think what we often do is we know people who actually put their children at the very top of that. Like they actually worship their children and their families, which is the wrong place. And because even good things, when worshipped, will not lead you back to God, because Jesus said, I am the way, and nobody gets to the Father except by me. And so I always think of that like to sin means to miss the mark. And even if I'm worshiping Christ-like attributes like charity and faith or family and or my church, like I could worship all those things and I'm missing the mark because
Mm-hmm.
I'm slightly off of who I could be and who I should be.
Yeah. Even in my 20s, like at least in the, what was it, like 2 3 years, it was really, I wanted popularity, and I like that
Yeah.
is what I needed to quote unquote survive.
Yeah.
That's what I needed to find value in myself, was having friends. And now it's if someone
Yeah.
likes me, great. If not, oh well,
You've
moving on.
reoriented your life.
I've drastically reoriented. I
Yeah.
probably have 5 close friends.
And what is the end result as far as how do you feel? What is the difference? If we you have those before and after, here's before meth, here's after meth. But what is the before and after of I was seeking popularity and now here I am today? What is the difference in your life?
A lot more contentment. Yeah. And yeah, I just think sometimes I want to go back and give that person a hug because she was lonely. Even though
Yeah.
she had the quantity of friends, she had maybe one close friend. And actually, I'm not even really not really. I'm not friends with that person anymore because they were not an emotionally healthy person. And they used me in a lot of ways and didn't, like, in my opinion, value me as a person.
Hmm.
And it is hard to admit that, but there are people like that who kind of use other people. And so I just think like that person was really lonely. That person found a lot of self-medication through alcohol. That person was not mentally healthy physically too, because I was drinking way too much alcohol. And so
You had a lot of
it's,
fun in college, it sounds like. You worked hard at it.
yeah, I did have a lot of fun. And even when I was checking Facebook, some of the old pictures popped up and I was like, yep, I was pretty intoxicated in that picture. And so, yeah, I did. And two, there were things that just morally, like, I just would not do now.
Yeah.
So,
So I had a one last question before we move on. Your coma story still fascinates me. Have you had anything close to that since? Any feeling, any experience that
like
since?
I call
Your
it my,
near death experience.
I don't think I have. I think it's a very
It's pretty
unique,
singular.
yeah, I think it's a pretty unique set of circumstances. And I am in, like, within the AFE community, one AFE sister in particular, I've talked to her about it. And she believes she actually went to hell and then to heaven. And just the
Really?
stark difference. She was completely tormented in hell, which honestly terrified me, and just was like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. Yep, we're just going to keep going this way. But it's interesting. I don't think I've had anything like it since. I think it's a very sacred space. And yeah, I think it's just a really unique. It's wild because not everyone has a near death experience. And I have one friend who's like, I'm mad that I didn't have a near death
They got
experience. And I was
gypped.
like, yeah, they felt a little gypped, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's really wild to think about. And sometimes there are moments that I doubt myself if it was, pardon me, actually real, but I do believe it was real. Like, I definitely believe heaven is real. 100%. I have no doubt at all now.
Yeah. I've never had an experience like that. I don't want to die, but I wouldn't mind a quick near death experience. So
Yeah.
we'll jump ahead a little bit. So I'm curious today, what is your mission? What is the sword you'd fall on? What's the hill you're gonna die on? What are you doing?
Oh, That's such a great question. So, like I mentioned, I have my podcast, Birth Trauma Stories, and the tagline is "We're holding space and finding light after perinatal trauma."
Mhm.
And that comes from Psalm, I believe it's 18. I should have this memorized, but I do not. Yeah. But if you go to my website, it is on my website, which is www.birthtraumastories.com. But I wanted to create, I feel like in the perinatal world, there's a lot of podcasts about labor, about delivery, about positive birth stories. And so I just felt there really wasn't a space for the stories that are different. And I like to say not good or bad, just different, because while my story is really hard and I would never wish an AFE on anyone, there's a lot of good in our story, like a lot of good. Just like what God has done is just not, literally no one here on earth can do it. Like the numbers were showing that I was going to die. And so while there is that good, I still want to hold that space because obviously I have sought a lot of therapy to get to where I am. I still suffer from PTSD, which is really hard, especially the triggers. You don't know when they're coming and it just overwhelms your nervous system and is really just really hard to deal with. But now I have tools in place that I can deal with it in a healthy way. And so the hill that I would die on is supporting perinatal trauma survivors. Like no one will come into my space and be judged for any sort of feeling that they've had, whether that's a postpartum mood disorder or something as severe as maybe their sister had a maternal death. I just really try to hold space for everyone, all while showing Christ's light and the love that Christ has for his family. And I think the bigger hill that I would die on is saying that heaven is not real. I will shout it from the rooftops.
You're not having it.
Actually,
None of that for Kathy.
none of that for
Not in her
Cathy.
house.
Yeah, not yeah, that's a good way to put it. Not in my
Not
house.
in my house.
I think too, like before I went through this experience, I would always say, "Oh, that's ironic," or "Oh, what a coincidence." I don't say that anymore. I could tell you multiple stories about the steps that God took to get me. One of the big ones is I changed OBs multiple times to get to the correct hospital that had the ECMO machine. And because if I had done a C-section, that was the other thing. I was debating between a C-section and a VBAC. Ultimately went with a VBAC, changed OBs multiple times because the previous OBs said I wasn't a candidate for a VBAC. And I was still like, I really feel like this is what God is calling me to do.
Yeah.
And it led me to a particular OB's office. And that OB's office only delivers at the main hospital. And that's the only hospital in Orlando, which is a pretty big city. I think there's 7 million people who live here. But at the time, it was the only hospital that did ECMO for adults. So the other major trauma center did ECMO, but only for pediatrics. They didn't have an adult team. So
Right.
no one can say, like, another hill I would die on. That's not a coincidence. God was
It was
directing
calculated.
it. That's a great way to put it. I've always struggled to kind of articulate it. Perfect way to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah. What a blessing. I'm glad he kept you around.
Me too.
Sometimes, and going back to that framework of that faith hierarchy or the pyramid or the
Mm.
altar, what kinds of things do you sometimes prioritize over faith or struggle with?
Ooh, that's such a good, the busyness of life, especially having young children. There are times, not so much anymore because they're a little bit older, but especially when they were like 2 to 5, I
They
would
need you
sit to,
every second.
yes, I can't always go to the bathroom by myself.
Yeah, they're banging up, they're sticking their fingers under the door.
Yeah, it's just like, guys, you can wait 5 minutes. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay. Like, your bottle of water doesn't need to be open right this second.
Yeah.
But the busyness of life, even still, I find it hard. After, I don't know how familiar you are with brain injuries, but I've had multiple brain injuries. Years ago, I had a pretty severe concussion, and you just literally sleep all the time. So you can imagine, like, a concussion can be severe. but a stroke is 10 times more severe.
Yeah.
And so I really still struggle to wake up, which is odd for me. I've always been a morning person. So that's out of my character. But because of the brain injuries, like it's just hard for me to rouse.
It's very
And
natural.
yeah. And so I don't always do my Bible study before my kids wake up. Sometimes I'm trying to fit it in like when they're eating breakfast and
Yeah.
I'm trying to read and they're like, "Oh, can I have another waffle?"
Yeah.
Or,
You get
"Oh, can
three
I have
words in and
yeah,
then
and then it's, "Oh, can I have more juice?" And so that can be challenging. I have tried to I feel like life is always about readjusting, trying to readjust of I don't always have to do it right when I wake up. Like our kids are young. God has us in the season that we need to be serving our children. Like they aren't capable of doing everything themselves yet.
yeah.
That will change. And I know there will be a day that I will miss the interruptions.
Hmm.
Today is not always that day, but there will be a day I will miss the interruptions. And but reorienting, like I don't always have to do it right when I wake up. After I get them off to school, I can take 20, 30 minutes and sit
Yeah.
down and do it then too.
Yeah. I find that I, so I social media for me in the past was a huge one. In fact, anytime I picked up my phone, the first thing I would go look at is like the dumb Facebook reels or YouTube reels and that's and the younger generation, it's even worse for them. It's just it's in their pocket, it's attached to them and they're on it all day. But I would find that it absorbed my free time and my free thought. And
Mm,
so what I did is I'm not on it at all now. So I have accounts, but my rule is I don't scroll. So I can't scroll. So I can log in, I can look at messages and notifications, so important things and events, but I just like I can't scroll because I find that when I start scrolling, I'm reorienting my life towards entertainment. And then my life just gets geared that direction. And so what I
mm,
do now is I've tried to create the habit that when I pick up my phone, if I'm going to something that's if I'm just there to kill some time, the first thing I'll open is some scriptures or something. So creating that habit in me has just really helped, even if it's
wow.
just for a second, like you just picking up a verse or two. Like that's I just try to get a couple of verses in and then I can move on. But it's for in my mind, it's just what do I put first? What's at the top of that mountain? And but I feel the struggle. I'm
Yeah.
in that with you.
Yeah, the struggle is real. In our sinful nature, it's not, we're not always wanting to put God first. But I love your idea of just placing boundaries around your social media. And then I set the timer. So, like, my
Oh
phone
yeah.
notifies me when I've been on any social media for an hour total. So, like, I have four different social medias, but it's an hour total between the
Yeah.
four.
You really got to
Um,
budget that pretty well.
yes, especially when I'm trying to create reels.
Oh
Reels
yeah.
can be challenging to
So I haven't
create.
even broached that yet. I can imagine.
Yeah, it can be really challenging. But yeah, I also have start trying again, I'm not perfect, so I'm still human, but trying to at least read something, even if it's only 3 minutes, something before bed, because I think it
Yeah.
just sets the intention for rest.
Yeah. Oh, good. So looking ahead, and we'll wrap up here in just a minute or two. Looking ahead, how, and again, going back to the altar, like if you are creating this monument to God with your life, this altar to God, what do you want it to look like? What do you want to achieve and
Ooh,
accomplish?
that's such a good question. I would love to write a book. I actually want to write it with my pastor and have a collaborative experience of like my story of the AFE and like his perspective of the A. I'm that weird person who loves hearing other people's perspective of our AFE. And I like to say our because it's a ripple effect. Like I experienced it, there are probably 1,000 people who, well,
Yeah, it impacted.
my husband works for Wycliffe. It's a Bible translation company. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it's a local, they have offices all over the world, but it's here in Orlando. They translate the Bible in native languages.
Cool.
And we had people all around the world praying for our family. And it's very, I don't know what the word is, not uncomfortable, but it's incredibly humbling when people come up to me and say, your story impacted me, or I donate blood. Like that's another hill I'll donate. I will ask people to
Donate
donate
blood.
blood
I hate it. I hate it
until
so much, Kathy.
I
It's
always say, if you're willing and able, and if you're
um
not, ask three people to donate on your behalf,
okay,
is what I
that I
tell
could
people.
probably do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So at
I
least
am
you're contributing.
I'm able and unwilling.
And that's okay. Not everyone loves needles, and I get that. My brother-in-law is the same way, so I like to rouse him about that. But yeah, so blood donations is another hill I'll die on. But I want to create this book from both of our perspectives, because he and his family, I mean, still do walk alongside our family so faithful and so diligently and prayerfully. And obviously, we need all the prayers we can get, because while we've entered year 5, it's less likely that I will continue to heal and continue to improve. But God is our great physician, and he can literally do anything. But what I want the altar to look like is looking to God, not looking to me or the book or the podcast or
Yep.
this program I've created. I should give credit where credit is due. I've had 2 friends help me create this program, but I don't want it to, I like literally just reorient, like trying to give God all the credit.
I love that. I and we know people like that. Sounds like your grandfather was one of those people whose like their life was a monument. And when you look at their life, it points you a specific direction. Like what a beautiful place to point straight back to Jesus. I
Yeah,
love that.
it's amazing.
Okay. Cathy, last question for you. For people who want more of you in their lives, how can they get it? Where can we find you?
So the easiest way is to go to my website. Like I mentioned, it's www.birthtraumastories.com. I'm on social media. I'm on YouTube, Threads, Facebook, and
Got it
Instagram.
all.
Yeah, pretty much got it all. I don't have TikTok because 4 is enough.
Yeah.
But I'm mainly on Instagram. That's like where I hang out a lot. I just like the way Instagram works the best. So you can find me there, or you can email me, Cathy@birthtraumastories.com.
Okay. Great.
Oh, I
Well,
forgot to mention,
please.
you can find my podcast, Birth Trauma Stories, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Okay. All right. Great. Cathy, it was so nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to staying in touch and seeing what you do.
Yeah, you too, Christian. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, you bet. All right. We'll see ya.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining this episode of The Holy Rebellion. We'll see you next week.